After the murder of George Floyd this past summer, we all felt powerless, and many of us still do. But what if I told you there was a way that you could make a difference in eradicating the moral stain of systemic racism from our city and from the US? I recently started working with an organization called Mapping Prejudice, an interdisciplinary group based at the University of Minnesota that works to map racially restrictive covenants, a structural barrier that has historically hurt minorities, specifically Black Americans, by preventing them from buying property and accruing wealth over the last century. A covenant is a legally enforceable agreement between the seller and buyer written into the deed of a property. Racially restrictive covenants were not only mutual agreements between property owners in a neighborhood to not sell directly to certain people, typically based on race, but were also agreements enforced and expanded through the cooperation of real estate boards and neighborhood associations. While this blatant racism appears to be a relic of the past, we are still living with the effects of these contracts. In fact, the segregation of neighborhoods both in Minneapolis and throughout American cities can be traced back to these contracts. This has led directly to the disproportionate division of wealth between white and Black Americans. So, the question is, how can we undo the systemic racism that has been transferred from one generation to the next, and what steps can we, as Blake students, take to address and educate ourselves about this grave injustice? Before I show you how you can take action, let me explain how deeply entrenched this problem is. The practice of racially restrictive covenants began in the 1910s, and for nearly 50 years, developers and realtors wrote racial covenants into the deeds of millions of real estate transactions, both in Minneapolis and throughout the United States. In 1968, the Federal Fair Housing Act finally outlawed these covenants altogether. However, the damage had still been done. The effects of racial covenants still exist today and serve as a concrete example of how structural racism continues to disproportionately affect the lives and socioeconomic well-being of racial minorities throughout the country. Kristen Delegard, founder of the Mapping Prejudice Project at the University of Minnesota, found that homes built under racial covenants in Minneapolis are still worth, on average, 20% more than the median value of homes in the city. And today, around 75% of white families in these neighborhoods own the home they live in, while for Black families, that figure is just 25%. According to the Brookings Institute in a November 2018 report, data shows that in the average U.S. metropolitan area, homes in neighborhoods where the share of the population is at least 50% Black are valued at roughly half the price as homes in neighborhoods with little to no Black residents. Racially restrictive covenants are part of the systematic segregation that made some neighborhoods wealthier than others. In the U.S., one of the best ways historically to ensure financial stability was to buy a house. Families that could buy homes in what were considered to be nice neighborhoods saw their value appreciate and were able to pass this wealth on to subsequent generations. Families that couldn't buy homes, much less in nicer areas, did not have the opportunity to access this important tool for the intergenerational transfer of wealth. Minneapolis is one of the cities in the country that has been most afflicted by racial covenants. In fact, Minneapolis has the largest gap between Black and non-Black home ownership rates in the United States, according to an analysis released in February 2020 by Zillow. Diamond Lake, which was heavily shaped by racial covenants, is 72% white and 78% of its homes are owner-occupied. The median household income in the district is $86,000, according to census data compiled by the Minnesota Compass. More than 40% of the neighborhood's households make more than $100,000 per year, and 53% of adults over the age of 25 have a bachelor's degree or higher. Near North, which was not heavily shaped by racial covenants, is a far more diverse population at 55% Black, 17% Asian, 9% Hispanic, and 14% white. The neighborhood's median household income is $28,000, and nearly 60% of households make less than $35,000 a year. Furthermore, less than a quarter of residents over the age of 25 have a bachelor's degree or higher. So, the question becomes, where do we go from here? Mapping Prejudice is a nonprofit advocacy educational center and organization through the University of Minnesota that was created to shed light on the historic usage and consequences of racial covenants. Organizations such as Segregated Seattle and Mapping Inequality, which was created by the University of Richmond, were also created to expose the existence of these covenants and map how they have hurt minority communities long after the practice was ruled illegal. So far, Mapping Prejudice has created a full dataset for Hennepin County and are in the process of gathering a comparable dataset for Ramsey County, which is when I started working with the project. This work is so vital because it allows us to better understand exactly how structural racism exists in cities such as Minneapolis. In order to rectify these injustices, more equitable housing policies are needed. This ongoing research will be an invaluable resource in shaping those policies as we strive to make this right. Unsurprisingly, the sheer volume of real estate records is enormous. Because of this, Mapping Prejudice urgently needs volunteers to help with the transcription and data acquisition process. If you want to get involved, visit their website and follow the instructions for training to get started. It only takes 10 minutes to analyze each covenant and contribute to the project. This work is so crucial because the databases and maps produced will be powerful community resources that will serve as a foundation for productive community conversation and fact-based policymaking. You have the power to make a difference and create change. Thank you.